You are now tuned in to the OSINT Curious podcast.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the OSINT Curious podcast or webcast project. OSINT Curious Project webcast. How about that? Okay. Thank you for joining us. We've got a special guest this week, and we've got a couple other people from the OSINT Curious Project as well. So why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? Tracy, why don't you go ahead and start?
Hi, I'm Tracy Mayleaf. I'm also known as InfoSec Sherpa on the Twitters, and I'm just delighted to be here. And I like to use my librarian background to help put OSINT research practices out into the world.
Awesome.
Awesome. DutchOSINTGuy here. Very pleased to have you here as a guest, Tracy. Yeah, really looking forward to interviewing you.
Thank you.
Next up.
And I'm Kirbster. Kirbster on Twitter, Kirby Pluses, my website pluses.net. And I'm really happy that Tracy's joining us as well. And so sorry about the last one that we had to kind of bump to now, but I think this is working out. So
Yep. Agreed.
Sector.
Sector 035 here. Welcome everybody and thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so everybody's here, so we'll kind of get into it. So, Tracy, appreciate you coming on. I know that we, like I said, I think we met in person for the first time back in February during the SANS OSINT summit there. Why don't you give everyone kind of a little bit of background about how you got into OSINT, what you're doing here, your librarian, and maybe some past experience and stuff, and we'll catch everybody else up.
Sure. So I'll start with a more recent anecdote, and then I'll explain my past. When I first made the career transition into information security, I asked Joe Gray, some of you may know, I asked him a question. I was kind of, whispering on a Twitter DM, what's OSINT? What is this OSINT? In my mind, I had thought it was a computer programming language or some like secret squirrel stealth thing. And him knowing my background said to me, you know what it is, you do it. And I was like, what? I don't understand. And that's when he broke it down for me. And he said, well, what did you call it when you were a librarian? I said, doing my job. I didn't have a fancy name for it.
Yep.
So funny story, when I speak to other librarians now, and I mention that to them, they're like, we never had a name for it. It was just doing our job. It was just research. So anyway, like I said, I was a librarian for 15 years. I have a master's degree in library and information science from the University of Pittsburgh. Go Panthers. And then before that, I was a travel agent. So I've always had some sort of research aspect to whatever job I had. And when I decided to make a career change about 4 years ago, I decided that I wanted to pursue something in the tech field. I, went about a very librarian approach. I made a lot of alerts for tech-related items, and I noticed that I kept gravitating towards cybersecurity, all the information security news. And that's when I had some other people explain it to me, said, I think you would be good at this. And I very quickly saw, I'm like, oh, okay, my research skills and my librarian skills could very much be useful in information security. And that's kind of the just bullheaded way I powered my career change. And
Sure.
most people were on board with it. I had very few people just telling me I actually had one guy flat out tell me I didn't belong in information security with my background, and whatever, didn't listen to him. I knew I was right. And so I try to use my library science skills of organizing information. And I also like to give OSINT talks about subjects that people may, in the information security realm, may not be familiar with. We were speaking earlier before we recorded about how I gave a talk at the OSINT SANS Summit about government, business, and legal research. And it's funny, things that I used to know just like the back of my hand are very unfamiliar in InfoSec world.
Yeah.
So then I gave us a talk called Lawyers, Guns, and Money at the Layer 8 conference in Rhode Island in June. It was an introduction to legal, government, and business research. And I'm just delighted that people are finding resources that I've known about all along. And that's what I try to do with my blog. I have a blog called OSINT Goodness. And it's just a way for me to kind of pull from my old professional background and share with people some things that they may not have thought of. And I trust that you are all intelligent enough to figure out how that fits into your world. I'm just going to give you the resource, tell you how it works, what you can find from it, and then it's up to you to, piece all that together.
Yeah, actually pivot
Tracey,
off
you
that
also have
information and go. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Tracey, you also have a newsletter, right?
Oh, right. Thank you. Yeah, I have a Nozzle Newsletter. It's Nuzzel. And all I do for that is I curate headlines. I don't create any original content. But what I try to do, though, is I try to find 10 stories, not news items, I should say, that, thank you, there it is.
Absolutely.
10 news items that are maybe a little bit under the radar. I'm trying to not regurgitate all the same stories that people are seeing. The only time I'll include something is maybe if I feel like it's super important and I want to make sure that people see it. But I do my best to find things that are maybe a little bit under the radar. I use some different keyword searches and things like that. And I also do one that concentrates just on Africa because Africa is a growing resource not only for growing cybersecurity professionals, but also the risks that we face. So it's an interesting dichotomy there. We have this very intelligent, smart, hardworking community of InfoSec professionals, doing their best, to make a name for themselves and to, carve out careers. But then they also have a lot of, risks, much like any country. But I also have the Cybersecurity Africa one. So yeah, I just try to use my special touch to create resources for the community.
That's awesome.
And shifting from a librarian to more of an InfoSec open source intelligence practitioner, what's the biggest difference, or maybe the hardest difference while shifting into another landscape?
Well, none of the jobs that I've had haven't really been OSINT focused. It's always sort of been a bonus. I would say probably the hardest is, when you do research for anything legal related, you have to be absolutely on point. It has to be correct. And that's the token of care that I take with everything that I do. So I guess it's just frustrating for me to see people putting things out into the world that, are maybe from what I would consider to be dubious sources. So I feel like trying to combat that is a challenge, like trying to feed information to, like I used to do a newsletter at my old job when I was a SOC analyst, and kind of hearing, questions from people, well, like I read on, whatever. Like I would put out a substantial newsletter and then people would counter it with, well, I saw on Reddit this and this and this. And I try to be like, okay, but what's the provenance of that information?
Yeah.
So trying to combat a more lackadaisical attitude among a lot of InfoSec people about from where they get their information.
Yeah.
Really clashes.
So really the fact checking and double checking of.
Yeah.
all the
So
goods.
that really conflicts with the principles that I have from library world. So that's probably the toughest.
Yeah, interesting. And you just said you was a SOC analyst, and I noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, that recently you were out of a job and the community really helped out, if I recall right.
Yes, I received a notification that a group of us were getting laid off. Big company, things happen. When I put the tweet out that I was looking for a job, it was retweeted over 1,600 times. I was so grateful for that. My Twitter DMs blew up. My LinkedIn blew up. Just amazing. So I am not prepared to announce my new stuff, but I will in due time. But I am just forever grateful to the community for how they really, even if they didn't have a lead for me, just support.
But it's good. It's just good to know that people are willing to help when you reach out for help, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It was incredible. And people are now circling back with me, asking for updates, and I can't really share anything just yet. But it's been phenomenal.
Awesome.
Hey, speaking of community, you actually are really strong as far as community sharing. How did you build such a network? I know that you're basically a force of nature on Twitter.
Thank you. Well, the answer is I don't know. I don't know how that happened. Again, that's just kind of ingrained in me as a librarian that I want to, to be that, that steward of information. And I want to make sure that I'm putting correct information out there. So that's what I do. So I've just, I just try to put information out there, and I'm happy to jump in and help people if they, express something. I really don't know it. I'm over 20,000 followers, and that it just astounds me. I'm very grateful, and I just really like using Twitter as a way to be a part of the InfoSec community, to help people and to, put out information that I think is important for people to learn.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one thing that we normally ask a lot of people that come on here, especially for OSINT, is in the fields of OSINT, there are many different disciplines, and there are things you can do from, kind of getting just scraping intelligence by, or actually coding, or actually humans, human intelligence, stuff like that. Is there something special that you're trying to learn more about? Is there something you want to get into that you just haven't had the time to really put the stuff behind yet?
Yeah, there's two things. I definitely want to learn Maltego more. I never really had an opportunity at my old job to really dig into Maltego. It was only a certain percentage of my job, so I only had a specific amount of time each day to do that. And the other thing that I need to learn is, and I'm kind of stubborn and old school in some ways, and I know that I need to learn how to automate more. I am just so used to doing things manually, and I feel like I can do them quicker manually. So yeah, that's just something that, like, in the back of my head, there's that whispering of, like, you really need to, learn Python more to automate this. And I'm like, shut up, I can do it. I know how to do it. I know what I'm doing.
No, I completely understand. I did for the first time, whatever, I did the global, what was it, the online CTF for Trace Labs and stuff, and it would have been a lot easier, and more information would have come out had I automated and used some of the scripts and stuff like that I've been looking and telling everyone else to use. But it was such a fast-paced kind of manual process that I just went through a lot of that stuff. And I know I would have done better. I did pretty good. I did okay. But yeah, it's the same thing. So yeah, automation is always something that I think everyone in our field can go through and get better at.
And I'm sorry, I just want to say too, is that there were times when I was doing some of my threat intel work at my old job, that there were things that I found, and again, for OPSEC reasons, I don't want to get into any details, but just things that I found on social media, for example, that because of my human brain and the reading that I did, I was able to make connections to things that if it was automated, it wouldn't have made that connection. So that's why I feel that there's value in that. So that's why I appreciate what automation can do, but at the same time, I'm like, but I can put things together better that, that automation cannot.
Sure. No, I agree. Okay, so we do have a question from the audience asking, it says, what is the future of OSINT in your opinion within minds of ongoing centralization and control of data?
Interesting one.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start with the softball questions. Okay.
Yeah. Come on, we're 10 minutes in. Everything's
it's all goodness. Wow.
Now, yeah.
Is there somewhere where I can look at that? Because I just want to make sure I'm understanding before.
It's in the chat there.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay.
What is the future of OSINT in your opinion? We'll just start with that one. I mean, data and centralization and all that stuff, whatever, is kind of finite. But like, what do you think the basics of OSINT will be in the next 5 years?
I think it's going to be even more like shooting fish in a barrel because there's so much data out there and it's self-posted and, very few people, and I'm talking about, outside the information security industry, say, potential targets, everybody's putting things out there and not a lot of people practice OPSEC, for one reason or another. So I think it's just, we're going to have data overload like every other industry. And it's also going to get more and more personal, especially with all these breaches. It's going to be, you're going to be able to locate someone's blood type probably a lot quicker. So I think it's going to be more invasive, more prevalent, and it's going to be a lot more data. And it's really going to require a lot more tools to kind of pick through things, or like I said, or skilled humans to make the connections. And I retweeted something this morning. It said, threat intelligence isn't data. It's how you interpret the data or something. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But it's also the skill set to actually make sense and make stories out of the data is going to become more important, because a data dump isn't going to cut it anymore. You need to actually tell a story and weave things together. So here I have an intelligent answer now. I was riffing to get to it. I think the future is going to be people who can better take data and better interpret it into results, whether that's going to be a cost-benefit analysis or a threat or some other business function. It's going to be more interpretation skills are going to be needed, so more data science.
Sure. What about the use of breach data in the future and how that ties to OSINT? Do you have any opinions on that, ethical or non-ethical? But I mean, obviously, breach data is very, very ubiquitous now. I mean, we have Dehashed, we have WeLeakInfo, we have a couple different sources that really thrive, and that's their business model is reselling breach data stuff. And a lot of the people in information security will use it for social engineering, red teaming, things like that. But it also is a pivot point for OSINT. Do you have any opinions or anything on that?
Yeah, kind of hearkening back to my librarian ethics. The terrifying thought is that an insurance company will go through breach data dumps to maybe try to find something to maybe eliminate someone's policy.
Absolutely.
Or things like that. I remember years ago, and I was still a librarian with security being my quirky hobby. I stood up at a conference in California and I said, we have to be wary of the Internet of Things, because you could have, a chair, because there was some ad coming out about a chair can monitor your vital signs. And I said, well, what if it monitors your weight? And what if that reports that to your insurance company?
Yep.
And everyone laughed. Everyone laughed. I think that was 2015. And people were laughing at me. And I'm like, wake up.
Yep. Yeah, there was literally a story I told on one of the previous episodes of this about there was a CPAP machine and someone was given through their insurance, and there was telemetrics on it, so it was calling back to the person that owned it, and they cut them off one day. One day it just wouldn't turn on, and they said, well, it's broken, I need a new one. Something. They go, oh no, you're not covered anymore. And they go, well, why wouldn't I be covered? It's under my insurance, all this stuff. They go, well, you have to use it 70% of the time, and you're only using it 30%. And they're like, from the recorded data that we're getting every single night while you sleep. And he's like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, so to answer your question is that, ideally, that if it's just, for OSINT research, ideally that should be off limits, but it's not going to be. You know that it's going to be finders keepers.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I took an ethics class, a legal ethics class, years ago when I was a librarian, and we had this whole discussion of if you get a PDF from opposing counsel and they didn't redact things properly, because there's different, if they redacted it in the in Adobe and then didn't resave it, then you can just go unredact things. That was a big discussion of can you and should you redact something. There was definitely all kinds of theories about that, of what was, ethical in the legal sphere for that.
Yeah, and then that all depends on the specific case, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I took one side at one point of, I took the finders keepers attitude of, if they weren't smart enough to save it correctly, but then, then you get this twist thrown at you of what if it was a matter of national security, or something like that.
Sure.
And I was like, but yeah.
It's always going to be case by case, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to start talking about, especially because, like you said, with social media data, with more postings, with these marketing firms that, like Hy-Vee out in Iowa and Kansas City and all that stuff, they just got popped with a breach. So I think it was mostly their credit card information from some of their gas stations and the things that they associate with Wahlburgers and stuff. But they're not the only grocery store or other food place that has the marketing data, whatever, which every time you swipe and you get the discounts, also measures against what you purchase and which card you use and things like that. So there are things that I think eventually will get leaked or breached, and we will have 5,000 points of data profile stuff, whatever, per person, per card or whatever it is, and that type of stuff is going to get out there, and it's scary, but it's something that we need to at least be aware of, so we can kind of attack to defend kind of thing. At least make people aware of this stuff there. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, there will be some other questions I'm sure put through. Let's see. We have another one from I think Access OSINT. As a librarian or former librarian, what interesting information have you found in books that may not have been seen so much on the internet?
Well, it's interesting that I've saved a lot of my online research books from ye olden days of 2006 and things like that. There are a lot of resources that are still in existence today that just get overpowered and outshined by Google and other search engines. So that's what I'm starting to do with my blog, is to try and pull some of these websites that I've only ever seen in my librarian books. And I'll go to the sites. And yeah, in some cases, the site's been, bought out, doesn't exist, or has turned into something completely different than its original intention. But I'm finding ones that are still operating, but you just don't ever hear about them because they get overshadowed. There's also, a lot of just kind of discussion and ethics and things like that, and principle sort of things that are in books that you don't necessarily see online too much. I mean, maybe there's blogs about them, but again, it is also a lot easier to narrow down a topic like, research ethics to a book rather than try to find things online. Because again, I'm all about provenance. Where's that information coming from? Who's writing this blog? Is this, someone just, trying to pull a trick and be sarcastic or not? So things like that. And also a lot of legal information. I cover this in the talks that I give. Not every court, not every jurisdiction is online, and they'll have printed materials.
Yeah.
And, also as far as the legal system goes, this is probably a whole other hour-long subject, but there's this whole thing called, the digital divide, and there's also an information divide. If you make all this legal information only available digitally, well, you may be circumventing parts of the population that need it the most, that they may not have computers at home, or they may only have limited access to computers through a library or a prison or something like that. So there is a lot of legal information that isn't available online or is out of reach for people who, may be disadvantaged and don't have the same access, but maybe need it. So that's definitely some issues there.
Awesome. Okay, we're getting along in regards to the interview, but I want to ask you one last question before we get into the news and some of the other stuff here.
Okay. And
maybe we can circle back if people have questions and stuff. But this is awesome information. That's why we keep pinging you with stuff. So I know. So the question is from Steve, and it says, "I know that she went through her career change to get into OSINT. Any advice for those who are trying to get into similar career changes?"
Well, I didn't do my career change specifically for OSINT. I did it.
No, just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I just knew that it was a benefit. Well, I mean, remember, I didn't know that OSINT was a word.
Sure. Yeah.
So I just knew that my research skills would be useful in InfoSec. I had no idea that there was a whole subfield of it. So take your boo back, sir. Sorry, the question was, how did I get into it? So,
any advice for people who are looking to make dramatic shifts from a librarian to a SOC analyst, from different culture aspects and stuff like that, or whatever.
Sure.
Anything you can tell them? Yeah.
Sure. So first of all, I went about this very methodical way of, I set up, Google alerts to see news items. I followed, I really just figured out, what books, what newsletters, what, websites, what blogs, what Twitter handles I should follow to absorb information. So you need to absorb a lot of information at first. And then the second is networking with people. You definitely need to reach out to people, ask questions, be a sponge and absorb. I would go to conferences. After I quit my job at the law firm in 2016, I went to some crazy amount of conferences. I want to say it was 12 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to conferences, I would sit in these sessions, and I would phonetically spell terms that I didn't know what they were saying. And then I would go ask someone, and I would sound it out. I'm like, they mentioned this. And someone would correct my spelling or my pronunciation and tell me what it was. Or I would look it up later. So you need to be curious. You need to connect with people. For the most part, most InfoSec people are very friendly and want to share information. A tip to try and break the ice, if you're trying to speak to maybe an established person that you might be intimidated to speak to them, ask them about some of their failures and how they recovered. I found that a lot of people love to maybe humble brag about, maybe some trouble they got into and how they fixed it. That's always worked for me. If I wasn't really sure what to say to someone, I would ask about, tell me about a time that you failed at something and, and how you recovered, how you fixed it or something like that. And just be a sponge, be alert, and then just like make a lot of notes and things, like say for jobs, maybe create a folder or, some taskbar, saving some sort of system to organize, save jobs that look interesting to you, read what the requirements are, and then start to study that. If you save 10 jobs and you notice that each, 8 out of 10 of them say must be, good at Python. Okay, well then that's your sign of, okay, well let me start taking some Python classes. Even if you're not qualified for the job right now, just save jobs that look interesting to you and learn from that. That's how you're going to learn your fundamentals, is by looking at jobs that are interesting to you.
Those are good, really great points. Yeah, asking people for the failures and then tracking jobs that look interesting and then seeing what the common denominator between those are. That's awesome. Really good.
Yeah, I wish you gave me these tips 20 years ago. Would be useful.
That's awesome. Okay, we're going to move a little bit further into the program now. I just want to say thank you to Hunchley, not just because Justin's on here, but he is, so hi, Justin. But also want to say thank you to Sands. Those are sponsors that have come out to help us and really does make it to where we can afford to go through and keep the Zoom channel going, keep the lights on, the WordPress site going, all that stuff, whatever. So we really do appreciate sponsors and those two in particular. Also, anyone who's on Patreon who's helping us with that stuff, amazing stuff. We really, really appreciate all the community or support as well. And then I think we have a new perk for the $5 level as well. I don't know if we want to talk about that.
Well, I think we just had a new Patreon named Whiskers who did a $5 level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
so
awesome.
People, if you want to support us, become a Patreon.
Yes.
I
helps
have to
us
say that
already.
I love that Ginsburg considered that a perk, though. So you get some whiskers.
That's what I was wondering. I
Thank
just
you,
trim
Whiskers.
a little bit of my beard and send it to you at the $5 level every year.
Oh boy.
Ooh, now
I was
there
thinking
we go.
cat food, the Whiskas cat food.
No, that's gross. No. It's definitely my beard. It's fine. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So like we said in the beginning, especially with Tracy's blog is OSINT Goodness, or the website, is that correct?
Yeah, you have it up here. It's Medium and
Okay.
the handle, and then I call it. Yeah, so I call it. Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's my most recent one. It's like a nuclear regulatory, like some sort of national nuclear group,
Yes.
and they have a whole bit on cybersecurity. So
Right. Yeah.
July 30th. I'm embarrassed. July 30th. Yeah, I need to update.
No.
I need another one.
All good. Believe me, summer is a time for kicking back and actually enjoying the fruits of your labor. And then once we get to September, October, everyone's going to be nose down working on stuff anyway. So
Yeah.
She for the people who are on the podcast and not being able to see this live, she has a Medium. It's medium.com @InfoSec Sherpa, and then her newsletter is Nozzle, and it's nuzzle.com /InfoSec Sherpa as well. So you guys can check that out. But that'll be in the show notes. So we'll make sure we get a link to all that stuff.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's move into some of the news. We have an article here, Martin Vigo. This is a new OSINT approach to go through and finding emails or from emails to phone numbers. Who wants to go through and take this one?
Well, I want to talk about it because I tested it. I don't know if somebody else in the team tested it, but it's I forgot his name. I need to look it up. Sorry for that, but
I think it's Martin Vigo.
Martin
Yep.
Vigo. Yeah. Okay. Martin Vigo. He made a tool which kind of enumerates pieces of a phone number from several websites. Say, for instance, you get the last two digits from a password reset request at eBay. You get the first four from a password reset or a username lookup from PayPal and from Google. You know, when you try and reset someone's account or your own account because you forgot it, and it will tell you, like, do you want to send this verification SMS to this number because you have two-factor authentication set up, for instance, for password reset. It will always show at least two digits. And this guy figured out, really smart, if you combine all those digits from the several websites, you will have a complete number. And that combined with, I think it was those numbering plans from postal code, area codes, and subscriber codes, you can even enumerate almost half of all fields and digits. And in the end, you'll have everything. And it works particularly good within the USA because I tried it for European numbers, and I didn't have that much success. But looking at the code, it's also looking up almost only US-based numbering plans and that kind of stuff. But it works kinda, but for European purposes, not that good. But for US purposes, really awesome. Yeah, really cool tool. And it's open sourced on, I think it's Git repo is on there. And he gave an awesome talk about it on, I think it's one of the B-sides.
Yeah, B-sides Las Vegas, I think it was.
Yeah, really cool tool.
Yeah, the demo I did watch is very cool, and it doesn't kind of enumerate all those through. I think it works both for landline and cell phone providers. So basically what it's attacking is the area code and then what they call the exchange, and then the last four, the subscriber number. Back in a past life, I used to work a little bit of telco stuff. So I know at least a little bit about the local, the intra, exchanges and stuff like that over. So yeah, it's kind of neat. And I'm a huge proponent of attacking the phone number. I really believe the phone numbers are kind of the keys to the kingdom nowadays, with everyone having, their two-factor authentication through their cell phone, or, their social media through their cell phone. Anything else is tied. Email used to be the thing because that's what it was, but with the onset of mobile technologies and stuff like that, I think that really anytime that you have someone's true to life carrier cell phone number, and then you can really go through and do a lot of pivoting from that and get a lot of information. And this is just another tool to go through and try to get that stuff through. So it's awesome to see that people are still working phone numbers through as an OSINT type of pivot. I love it.
Yeah, cool tool. It's called email to phone number for the podcast listeners. Yeah, cool tool. Anything else on this one?
It's really, really neat. Yeah, because SIM swapping, SS7 attacks, whatever, for actually finding your phone number and all that. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff you can do with this. Yeah, it's really, really neat. Okay. Anybody else have a comment, question, concern, something? I thought I heard somebody. Sorry.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So as far as recommending defense for people, is this where the password on the account through the phone provider comes into play?
Yeah, a lot of that. Anything that you can set up before the actual, social engineering attack that happens at the provider level or something. Yeah. The other thing that I've preached very, very heavily is, there are things like MySudo that are only available on iPhone, but there are Google Voice. There's other things you can get that will either tie back to the original number, or they will be, the burner numbers that you can give out. And so you can kind of compartmentalize with what you give out to people, so that people aren't tracking back to your original cell phone number. And then once you start flexing that muscle, it's a little bit easier to go through and give out those MySudo numbers or your Google Voice number and say, okay, if a call comes in, I know it's coming in from there. And also, if you're getting spam calls, you know exactly where that phone call came from or who leaked that information. So it's just a way to kind of compartmentalize and set that stuff out there. So.
Ooh, may I share a quick, you just said something that reminded me, may I share a quick funny story related to having a separate number?
Yeah.
So to your point of the security, I one day received an incoming text saying that it was American Express and there was something wrong with my account and it looked very realistic and blah, blah, blah. But it only took me 2 seconds to realize that it was fake, because I knew which number it was coming in on, and I knew that the credit card company didn't have that number for me.
Right.
File. So I wound up giving them screenshots and reporting it to them and everything. But that's something that when I speak to, to librarians and to tell their patrons, just be mindful of what contact information you have on file with your bank and with your credit cards, because if something comes in from something else, be wary of that. Because I said, a bank isn't going to sit there and find your alternate Yahoo account to send you something.
No, it's true. Yeah.
And sorry, I just want to have one other funny comment I wanted to mention is you mentioned burner phones. I was at a conference a year or two ago, and there was an academic there just being very condescending to everyone and saying, you need to all go home and convert all your grandparents over to burner phones. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
Like they'd all, does that, and I tried to challenge him on that. I was like, okay, but does that really help their situation, by having something disposable, considering, maybe memory loss issues and things like that. And he kept fighting me on it. So finally I just said, I really don't think that's Nana and Pop-Up's threat model.
Right. That's true.
I get the reason why you're talking about burners, but why? He's like, oh, all elderly people should have burner phones. No. What?
Yeah. Well, maybe for the long batteries and the larger knobs when they get out.
Yeah. But it just made me frustrated. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of speaking to a information security academic, that I just found his condescension and advice didn't feel like it was based in what we see.
Yeah. Cool.
What's good for all is not always good for all. So yeah, I understand. Okay, awesome. All right, we will move on to the next topic here, which is something Dutch is going to have to pronounce, because I would murder it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I think someone will yell at me for this too, but it's called, it's made by the people from Forensic Architecture. It's basically a really impressive open source intelligence investigation using machine learning and all kinds of algorithms to detect military vehicles during the battle in Ukraine in 2014. And it was just really impressive to see how they used techniques. For instance, we had Bellingcat use, but they did it in an automated way. So maybe this will give you kind of an insight how the future of open source intelligence can look like, because that's what I initially found particularly interesting. These are just a bunch of the people at Forensic Architecture are really good at automating stuff, making up the timeline where a battalion of Russian army tanks, or at least initially they were labeled as rebel vehicles or rebel group vehicles, but they all had unique identifiers, bringing them back to at least being delivered or sponsored by the Russians. So, and it's a 9-minute video, and it tells within real great detail how they did it and how you can do similar research, or at least by thinking of, for instance, they had hundreds and hundreds of hours of video footage within the battle area, and they made a algorithm which detected only that a specific make and model of battle tank, and then they, on top of that, they wanted to detect all those tanks had a white dot on them, which make them fairly unique to recognize. So they made a model on top of that, and they had different angles of view where a specific tank was stranded during the battle. So it's really interesting. Just go and look it up. We'll put a link up in the show notes. It's called the Ilovaisk, and I probably pronounced that really wrong, but it's the Ilovaisk Forensic Architecture. When you look that up in Google, it will pop up at first hit. So it's really interesting. It's all about the Battle of Ilovaisk during, August, September 2014.
That's so cool. And this brings me back to another point that I always try to get people's mind wrapped around is the time frame for OSINT. Like, this stuff is just now coming to fruition with machine learning and all this, and it's back from 2014. This is almost 5 years ago, but they're able to go through and keep doing research on this stuff in current day, which is awesome. It's the same thing with, with the blockchain, the Bitcoin, the drug transactions, Darknet, all that stuff is, that stuff was happening back in 2012, 13, 15, whatever it is. But just now are people getting into all those old transactions and all those, pictures, early social media, stuff like that. The long tail on OSINT is really where a lot of researchers are going to find a lot of gold, just because we have the time to go through and put towards this stuff, and the internet never forgets. So it's one of those things where it's really awesome.
Yeah, and this is a field I really want to learn more about, especially the machine learning, because it helps you shift so much faster through, let's say, petabytes of video footage. It gives you
and recognition
the ability to start really in-depth analyzing vast amounts of war data, for instance, genocide data. Yeah. Well, I wanted to point it out. Really impressive work.
No, it's awesome. Yeah. No, and especially if this is a model that other people can take away and say, okay, maybe I'm not doing war-torn situations, but maybe if I want to do something similar with visualization and just to see how, for business intelligence or stuff, how cities are racking up and things like that. There's things to overlay on top of this. It's a really neat way to go through and tell a story too. Which, back to Tracy's point, is how we're going to move forward in regards to OSINT with a lot of stuff. You can data dump all you want, but if you can't sell it to the C-level or to the common layperson, if you can't tell them what the actual vulnerability or the possible threat behind all this stuff being out there is, then it makes no difference for all your research, because you have to be able to explain it. So it's awesome.
Yeah, there's a saying when you're speaking to the C-suite, be brief, be brilliant, and be gone.
Yep. Yep, it's like the old PowerPoint thing where it's the 10, 20, 30, 10 slides, 20 point, 30 minutes max, you just want to be, Awesome. Okay, so next we will get into an update from Twits.
It was released, I think about 2 weeks ago. They released Twins 2.0. So it was a really huge update, which gave you a lot of new filters, like filter on member lists, or filter on a certain amount of likes, or filter popular tweets on specific topics. And I just clicked on it now. It's already on 2.1.0 version. Yeah. I just wanted to point out this is a really actively being maintained Twitter information gathering tool and also analysis tool, because when you hook it up to Elk or something else, you can visually graph a lot of information through Elasticsearch, for instance. So that's I almost use it on a daily basis, because it's doesn't take that much of an amount of resources. You won't have trouble of API rate limits and stuff, and especially if you want to quickly scrape, for instance, someone's whole user account, all the tweets ever, and you want to just have it in a comma separated file or something, it's particularly useful.
Yeah, it looks very, very powerful. I mean, like with usernames, with even here it's -S for pineapple. So any tweet containing pineapple. So it's focused for keywords, usernames, emails, phone numbers, geolocation. A lot of that stuff there, and it's all dumps out to JSON, so it's searchable, and you can build a database around that stuff. And selfish, shameless plug, whatever. There is a channel over on OSINT.team that is dedicated for the Twit project, and also the other project the gentleman has in Telegram. So he's an awesome dev, very, very responsive, very, very hardworking for the OSINT community. So if you are interested in talking with him specifically, or in adding or helping or doing anything else, even just testing for him, OSINT.team, and I think the channel is just Twint, TWINT. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So just a huge update, which I wanted to point out.
That's cool. I didn't know you use it daily. That's kind of neat. I've heard of a lot of people using it. I know there are a lot of use cases, but that's a good recommendation. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just a hoarder of data. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to FIRMS, FIRMS. I believe this is through NASA. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I never heard of this one until last Tuesday. I was in a workshop, and a colleague of mine pointed this out, and I found it particularly interesting because there was a story about it when, for instance, there are these ships on fire in sea, which are really hard to geolocate, but this detection system, when it's live, I think that you will always see the last 7 days or at least the last 24 hours. So if you know from the news, breaking news, there is a specific incident about a fairly large scale fire. So for instance, recently we had those boats up in the Strait of Hormuz, which were with a limpet mine or a torpedo, for instance. And you would see that. And you would also see those fires within urban areas. So in my personal experience, I had some cases, for instance, where there was some shelling or there were some bombings within Syria. And people on social media were talking about, well, there were bombings here and here. But it was really hard to geolocate because the area was already so heavily bombed that it was hard to distinct within satellite imagery. And now you at least get a decent region to search in within other satellite imagery once you know where a fire was. So I found this one really useful and interesting for a very particular use, searching for fires, bombing, shellings and such, but could be useful. And it's just NASA.
Yeah.
They have these satellites up in the skies and they just openly share this information. And you can even export the KMLs and yeah. Some people just want to see the world burn.
All right, that was pretty good. All for that, yeah. No, that's awesome. That is, and like I said, visualization and all that stuff is very cool. It does do like the quick view for today, 24, 48, 72, 7 days. And then there's some other filters, and it looks actually pretty robust. So yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and you can even set up alerts for certain areas and export data for over a vast amount of time. I think.
Wow.
It's well, check it out. Just play with it.
It does, yeah. It has some advanced searches, and like one of those is like a time frame, so you may be able to dip back in time to go through and check that stuff out. Also, you can do it grids versus points and things like that. So there's some visualization stuff on there. Really, really neat. That's just very cool.
Yeah, and I talked to someone at Bellingcat, and they said, well, we also used it for deforestation because they burn down a lot of forest. It's really interesting. Yeah, there's all kinds of uses for this one.
That is awesome. Okay. Well, yeah. So again, it's firms FIRMS.modaps MODAPS.EOSDIAS.NASA.gov. And again, don't drive your car into a ditch for that. We will put the show notes all together and make sure that you guys have clickable links and all that stuff there. So yeah.
Yeah, and otherwise just Google for NASA and fire map.
Well, you got to Bing for Google and then Google for, yeah, okay. All right. So next thing, big shout out to Gonzo on the OSINT.team site. We were looking for, I think deep.web was a lot of people's kind of go-to for a lot of dark markets or, kind of what's going on in the deep web stuff. That one got shut down a couple of months ago. Dark.fail, I think, is still up. But this one it looks like a little bit better, more in-depth kind of thing. It's darknetlive.com. So it goes through some of the news, some of the markets that are still up. Gives you all the onion links to that stuff. It also gives you to do the forums. Gives you a little bit of description if it can. Some of the stuff I found is kind of spotty on here, just because it'll say, do you want to know more about this? And you go to it, and it's a dead link. So it seems like it's updated to a point, but only for the more popular kind of the forums and the markets and stuff out there. So this is just another resource for people who are doing any sort of deep web or dark web type of investigation, things like that. Seeing, especially in the past 6 months, maybe even a year, how much has changed in that kind of that community, that space out there, with a lot of rightly so, a lot of markets being brought down, and there's a lot of exit scams. There's some other stuff that's going on. So it's another resource for you. if you, I personally still use the Huntley Darknet, the Excel spreadsheet that comes out every single day. I think I kind of live by that stuff. It's very, very detailed, and I like it a lot. But yeah, it is. Yeah, sorry, I'm reading and talking at the same time. It's not working. Tracy, what do you have? You got some fun OSINT related stories?
Yeah, I saw the time, and I thought if you didn't mind, I'd share a couple stories of when I was a law firm librarian of the types of things that we'd research, because I was also realizing too, I don't think people fully understand what a law firm librarian researches.
Sure.
So a couple ones, something that Nico was just showing about the fire map reminded me. This one time I had to research weather across the Atlantic Ocean. I had to follow a freighter. The reason why this was a law firm issue is the freighter was loaded with Italian shoes, leather shoes. And at some point during the journey from Italy to the US, water had leaked inside the containers and had ruined the shoes. So a couple things came to mind. First, my colleagues and I were like, okay, so you're saying that somewhere there's shoes they can't sell. So let's get our hands on that. But what the lawyers wanted to know was, for jurisdiction, liability reasons, etc., they wanted to know at what point during the journey did it rain, so that they could try to figure out, did the rain happen at the beginning of the journey and then they were negligent to patch the situation, or did it happen at the end, or did it happen somewhere in the middle? Unfortunately, this was so long ago, I don't remember all the tools that I utilized, but I also used just a lot of, not human, but just humans, of, calling, geographic libraries, geography libraries. I have a degree from Penn State, so through, alumni services, you have access to libraries, which is another tip, that if you are an alumni of an institution, you most likely have some sort of at least digital access to the holdings of a library. So I phoned the Geosciences Library at Penn State to ask for, their tips on resources to locate that. So in the end, I was able to piece together a basic weather map of what this ship did, so that they could figure it out. I used to be on catastrophe watch, is what I called it. As a law firm, the first law firm I worked for specialized in insurance. So anytime there was, something insurance related. So I was on catastrophe watch. Many years ago, there was a New York Yankees baseball pitcher who flew his plane into a building, Corey Lytle.
Yeah.
So I had to then quickly figure out who owned the plane, who owned the building, figure out all that information. While Manhattan was going through a big growth spurt, there was a lot of building. There was unfortunately a lot of crane accidents and a lot of construction accidents. Something that I worked on a lot at this one firm was the Ted Williams Tunnel in Boston. There was unfortunately there was inferior slurry. Slurry is the goopy adhesive that holds the panels together, and one of them unfortunately killed someone, and I had to just research everything about the tunnel, who made the slurry, and then who they were associated with, and all this stuff. And then fast forward to 2015, I flew to Boston for a librarian conference, and I was in a taxi or an Uber or something like that with my husband, and we're going through the tunnel, and all of a sudden I start poking my head out the window, and the driver and my husband are like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I'm having serious deja vu right now, and I don't know why, because I hadn't been to Boston in like 20 years before that trip." So I'm like, "Why is this so familiar to me?" So I asked the driver, I said, "Wait a minute, is this the Ted Williams Tunnel?" And he's like, "Yeah, lady," and I was like, "I've looked at photos of this tunnel for so long that's why I was like, oh my, wait, I know this place." So it's things like that. I mean, I don't know. I think that a lot of people hear, law firm librarian, and they think it's heavy duty with legal research, and it can be. But one of the reasons why you have librarians on staff is to do all these subject matter specialty areas. You can give the heavy duty legal research to, the first year associates, for example, or, things like that. They're going to be more familiar with it. Where we would come in is a lot of these things, weather, construction. Especially with insurance stuff, there's a lot of investigating who owns things and who parent companies are.
Yeah.
A lot of connection making too. Well,
and I imagine, especially with a lot of the law stuff, if you're actually presenting, you have to, like you said, be more visual. So you have to go through and find out all that stuff just so that you can build the picture for the jury, for whoever else is taking, notes in regards to that stuff. It's not enough to go through and say, okay, the guy drove through the tunnel. If you can build the backstory and say who was commissioned to go through and build that, who they sublet that to, what particulate did they use to go through and do that, have there ever been any recalls in regards to that, you can start building case doubt in regards to that stuff. But I could completely see the research going into the backstory of the event prior to. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned recalls. I briefly worked as a librarian for QVC, the home shopping channel. And I know people are always like, "What does a librarian do at QVC?" I'm like, I make sure there's items that people are selling, that nobody died from using them.
Not lead-based, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did was I worked in conjunction with the legal department, and somebody would want to sell a product on QVC, so I would need to do due diligence. They claim to own a trademark or a copyright for this product. Do they really? Have they ever been sued? Has this product ever been used as another name? And, did they change the name to cover up things like that? So, yeah, you have to really dig in. So that's why in my mind, hopefully everyone understands now why I was so persistent of, the library science background was so key to InfoSec, because there's all this kind of research that you'd have to do to pull this together. So I just thought people
information. I think a lot of people, especially who are interested in OSINT, like they see InfoSec as like the main way that you can go through and get into that. But there are a lot of opportunities outside of information security or cybersecurity that really use OSINT. Like I said, my backstory is collections and finance. Like I do a lot of fraud investigation. I did a lot of skip tracing for collections. So I was using OSINT just like you, didn't even know it was a word. But yeah, I was doing literally that same thing and tracking people down, using social media and all that. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I really like to hear all those stories, because the different perspectives always give me new inspiration for future investigations. Yeah,
absolutely,
really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are running a little bit long. I did want to go through and look at two other real quick things. One, I don't know if anybody else has heard of Yippee. Yippee. So Yippee is it's something to do, like the company does something with machine learning and AI as well. But they have a free search tool. It's just yippee.com search. And I don't know if anybody else has ever worked with anything called Carrots V2. It's kind of a cluster search engine. I love it. It's brilliant. Yeah. It's very visual. It breaks stuff down into a lot of really, really nice things for pivoting and stuff like that. This does something similar, and it breaks it down by either the sources. I lost it. Sources, sites, times, and topics, and then you can get more specific if you drill down. So it's a search engine that kind of clusters, and then from the clusters, it allows you to go through and deep dive kind of into that. So yippee.com is something else. Whatever. If anybody has any.
It's powered by. I just see it pop up by IBM Watson.
Yes, it is. So, which is kind of neat and scary. Lastly, I want to go through and talk about something that Beowulf88 found, and I've been kind of playing with obsessively. It's called Sphere. It is the new browser. The really cool thing about this browser is that it allows you to go through and set, just like maybe MySudo kind of comes like that. You can actually go through and set profiles. So it'll allow the browser to go through and be responsive and have unique signatures in regards to what it does. You can play it over over Tor. It allows you to go through and set up custom DNS stuff. You can go through and tell it, even if you're running a Windows machine, if it's a different operating system, it is kind of neat. It's a little clunky. You do have to download it and kind of set it up and stuff, but it's not difficult to set up. The profiles are kind of the fun part about it. but I haven't been able to go through and really find a way to go through and have multi-tabs open at once. So that's it's not as, I don't think, functional as like Chrome or Firefox, but this one does claim to be absolutely free, secure, and anonymous. And the anonymity kind of comes from you backfilling the information so that when you're getting pinged and when you're getting tracked online and stuff like that, they're getting maybe not so great information, which is kind of fun. And so I wanted to put that one out there as well.
Yeah. I found it particularly interesting because I always like to figure out new operational security tools, add-ons, tricks, and this is basically, it's a 1.3 version, so I think it's fairly new.
Yep.
But when they maintain this actively, I can see a fairly large fan base for this one because like you say, your browser fingerprint, your GPS location, your proxies, everything is in there. So
it even goes to the point of like what update of Chrome that you're using in regards to the extension stuff. So even though you're going through Sphere, it will send out the what is it, 66.7 update. That's the current browser model that you're on there and stuff. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's you can really tweak it to your own threat model for that specific case. So yeah, I really like it. Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So let's see. Lastly, I think we wanted to get into some of the OSINT Curious blog posts. I think that we've had some really awesome stuff coming out here lately, and I think we just wanted to kind of touch base on some of that stuff. We had a guest post for the cell tower data. That went over really well. I think a lot of people enjoyed that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Dutch, you're not talking.
Oh, I think that's something I just did my do not make sound trick. So
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because I know a lot of people, especially with governmental backgrounds, are really interested in this subject particularly. And it's always so hard to make sense of cell tower information, or at least that's what I hear mostly analysts talk about.
Yep.
And this write-up was fairly straightforward, in my opinion. I read it and I was like, well, makes sense. I could figure this out. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
It is a little bit more of the digital forensics side of the house, but I think that's still a welcome avenue for a lot of OSINTs. I think that's where a lot of people start to get into jobs and start playing with a lot more of the OSINT side of stuff as DFIR. So that's always welcome.
So thanks, Jeff Lomas, for that one. He
absolutely. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll have to have him on to go through and talk about that sometime, actually.
Yeah.
Sure. Unfortunately, Kirby couldn't stay, but Kirby, updated a little bit more about her Facebook matrix stuff. So that was always awesome. And then the blog post about the Facebook 1 and 2, I think just came out just last week for the second one, I believe.
Yeah. Well, that was, I think, the most of the work was done by Kirby and especially Technoset. She made a lot of work out of this. And, well, I think it was well received by the community because everyone was looking and finding and figuring out their way through Facebook searching, and she summed it up. And I think with also the blog post from Micah, the JSON and the web encoding, that helped because a lot of people, I found it very hard in the first two to base 64 encode because that's not something you do on a daily basis, or at least I don't. So all in all, I think the combination of those blog posts are really valuable. And yeah.
And a lot of the skills keep building on themselves as well, which is really nice. And it's kind of fun to see like the 10-minute tips versus the blog posts that do kind of connect. And if you are looking at it the right way, like Tracy said, we'll give you the resource, but putting it into your own frame and using it in your day-to-day or even something that you've never even thought about using it for, it really helps to go through and get a different perspective on that stuff. So it's awesome to go through and see that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I see Lorenzo asking if we tested the brand new tool for Facebook browsers. Yes, I did test it out this afternoon. Someone dropped, I think you dropped it, Lorenzo, within the OSINT.team channel, but it was also pointed out by Kirby to us on the Git. It's some kind of an API which
Yeah.
I still need to play a little bit more about, but it works. It brings back, you can see comments and that kind of stuff, but I do not want to go too much in depth of it because people of Facebook are listening in and they're killing our fun tools.
I think you brought up a good point about the API going through kind of their server type stuff, whatever, and we don't know, where that, if they're, I mean, I don't want to claim it's a man in the middle type thing, whatever, but like at what point do the information get, siphoned, whatever, about your searches and things like that. So it's kind of OPSEC there too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, sure. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. But still, I think it's fun to see that everyone is still just jumping in on Facebook searching, and well, that's good, and that's where I like the community so much because people.
So I do have a question. Did anybody see the great hack that was that Netflix special that came out about Cambridge Analytica or anything else? I think it just came out a couple months ago. I ended up watching it like 2 weekends ago, whatever, and I wondered if this was the, because Facebook and a lot of the search stuff has kind of changed rapidly over the last 4 months. I wonder if this is kind of the wave crash of those things or whatever that happened because of that stuff that happened.
No, I think it's a combination. I think it's Cambridge Analytica, and I think it's also GDPR.
Okay, yeah,
so
that's what,
I think it's a combination of those privacy scandals swarming around Zuckerberg and Facebook. So
yeah, and it's only going to get weirder, I think. So
yeah,
it's good and it's bad, but it does drive researchers, analysts, OSINT people, whatever, to go through and to see what other things can be used. If you're URL jacking and you're doing the combinations, whatever, and you're copy and pasting all that stuff, whatever, what you can actually still get the website to return. You're kind of bouncing up against that data warehouse essentially and seeing what plugs out. So it's kind of awesome.
Yeah. Really like that one. Yeah, and I think it's also good every now and then things should change.
Yep.
Just because people will get lazy and hang over and like, well, everything works fine, and now you keep on edge and wanting to try and figure out new stuff.
I agree. Let's see here. I think we're wrapping up. We've been about an hour. We're going to go a little bit long here, which is always okay, especially on a Sunday. I did want to ask Sector, because he's been quietly just back here, not really sharing anything, whatever. If he wanted to talk about his little project that just came to an end, today or yesterday? Is that right?
I'm really busy on the background here for you guys.
Yeah, I don't doubt you. You always are very busy doing things. We really appreciate it.
I added it to the show notes. We'll be on the website too.
Okay.
We really need some backlinks. We really need to SEO this part. Matthias, also in the webcast, he's listening in. Hi,
yep.
Matthias. We spent weeks on end just going back and forth and analyzing how scammers work. Because I got a new follower who worked at the Norton Help Desk, and I thought, this is wrong. And that's when a little adventure started with me and Matthias, and 4 weeks on end, we tried to get a grasp on how do they work, how big is this, and it turned out bigger than we thought. And 7 blog posts, we explained all the techniques that we used. We got figures, we got numbers, we got images, we got graphs, we got everything in the open so people can try and learn something from this. And hopefully we educate people too, like, don't take everything for granted and research a little bit when someone follows you or when you see a number somewhere posted. So, really awesome thing. And finished just in time because, end of August, it's time for me to also maybe take some time off, except for my newsletter.
Maybe start a different chapter of what you're doing next and stuff.
Yeah, I really like this series because I think it's really cool to see. Actually, it felt like you were, as a reader, you were part of a live, ongoing online research investigation, and especially the techniques used are interesting when you want to learn those techniques. And I really found it really cool to see the whole process instead of just most blogs are just like summarizations of a whole investigation, and this had everything into even littlest details. So yeah, really cool. Tip my hat for that series.
Yeah, we didn't really work in a chronological order. We tried to jump back and forth, but each and every blog has a certain topic. One of them goes to like ownership. One of them is just going into details on domain names. So we try to split up different parts of the investigation. And I learned a ton from Matthias, and I hope I also taught him a few things. And it was really great working on this, and really great to share this with the community. And we just now hope to try and get some better rankings in Google, so people will see our blogs first before the scammers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is an awesome walkthrough, and really, really cool that you guys were able to go through and team up and work on that stuff. And it all came because just an innocuous little thing, like you got a follower. And then from there, this entire 7-part blog post about scammers came out of that. It's just incredible. It's really, really neat.
So no one wants to follow you now anymore because they know you will thoroughly look into them.
All right, awesome. Well, okay. Well, that I do recommend everyone go out and read the entire blog post. There's some awesome infographics that he put up there as well. And Matthias did some amazing work. Sector did some awesome work on this stuff. So give them some love and send that out to the interwebs and all that stuff there. And we will kind of wrap it up. So we're gonna go around and kind of do our shameless self-promotions, where we can be found, anything you guys got coming up, anything you want to highlight, shout out you want to give out to anybody, all that stuff. So Tracy, guest of honor, please go ahead. Anything that you have that you want to go through and just let out there so people can find you and connect with you and make it even 40,000 followers.
Well, thank you. Yes, I guess the show notes, you'll have my blog and my Nuzzle InfoSec Sherpa on Twitter. I will be speaking at DerbyCon.
Oh, nice.
About 2 weeks. It's way sooner than I'm ready for.
Very, very soon, yeah.
So
I was going to ask if you were going to Derby, yeah, so that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's my first time ever at Derby. I'm giving a talk called Empathy as a Service to Create a Culture of Security. It is not OSINT related, but it is based on a library science principle of the reference interview, and I correlate that to incident response.
Oh, very cool. That is awesome. Yeah, so DerbyCon coming up very quick. Sorry, Dutch. I think it's the 6th to the 9th or something else like that.
Sounds about right. And I believe I'm speaking on Sunday at 1 o'clock in track 2, but definitely if you're going, definitely consult the schedule on site, because I'm sure things can change. But yeah, please come see my talk and look, please, if you're there, give a shout out, to say hi. I'm friendly. So, but thank you so much for having me on here today. This has been fun.
Pleasure. Really, really nice talking with you. Awesome. All right, Dutch, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to point out, I think DerbyCon is always recorded, right? So it will probably be on the YouTubes or something. Yeah, because we Europeans always miss out on these cool cons.
Yeah. Oh, and this is the last one for anyone who does or doesn't know. DerbyCon has been going for 9 years. This is the last one they're going to do. This is called Finish Line. So it's kind of a special thing. I've been to DerbyCon twice. I really, really enjoyed it. It's one of the bigger conferences that I've been to that I still feel like I got a lot of value out of and met a lot of nice people and stuff. It's very cool. But yeah.
Yeah, cool.
All right, Dutch, where can we find you?
They can find me most of the time on the Twitters, DutchOSINTGuy, and I'll be attending a few closed conferences, and there will be some open conferences coming up, which I cannot disclose yet, but working on stuff and working on new blogs for OSINT Curious, especially a part 2 of the Twitter searching and muting the algorithm. So
very cool. Yeah.
Should be there in the near future. So that's it.
Awesome. Sector, where can people find you? What can they throw at you, all that stuff?
Well, of course, you can find me on the Twitters. Everything I do, I usually post on there, whether it's quiz time related, OSINT Curious related, whether it's private stuff. Monday morning, tomorrow, that is, let's see, 6 and 6 a.m. UTC. Newsletter's coming out, almost finished. And yeah, end of September, I think there are still some tickets available. Citizens of Evidence. I'll be in Berlin together with Emmanuel Freudenthal, and we will be looking at the sky, looking at air traffic signals and how you can catch it with just like 20 euros of materials and a laptop.
And that's your SDR talk, is that right?
That's the SDR talk. That's correct.
It is awesome. And also the key findings blog, yeah, so all that stuff, yeah.
Absolutely.
And how about yourself, Gint?
Oh, me? No one needs to know where I am.
Okay.
No, I will be at DerbyCon. We are going to try to get some OSINT meetup time for some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing specific, but there's so many different groups in regards to OSINT community. So, you got people, I think Thug Crowd was on here listening earlier. They don't get into a whole lot of OSINT, but they are pretty good with their OSINT stuff. You got Trace Labs, you got OSINT Curious, you got all the guys who are going to be over at the OSINT CTF for the social engineering village. So that's always going to be fun. So we're going to find some time that we can try to get everybody together and just, have a couple drinks or grab something or something. So DerbyCon will be good. Then I think in October is Hacker Halted, and I'm actually speaking out there in Atlanta, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be doing that stuff. Kansas City, we'll be doing our OSINT meetup group. I think is the last Thursday of the month here. I think it's the 27th. So I'll get the information out on the Twitters for that stuff. But I think it's going to be at one of the local libraries here. We're going to go through and have a couple people and maybe work on some OSINT stuff locally. But that's about it for me. I think that is going to wrap us up as well for the OSINT Curious project. Anybody else got anything last minute? Anything else before we go?
No, I just want to thank all the attendees. Awesome they tuned in again from all over the world.
20 people total on the webcast today. That's the panelists and the attendees. So awesome that people keep showing up. We really appreciate the support and the questions. Really gives us a lot of momentum to keep doing this live, because it is something where we like to interact with people, and stuff changes every single day in the OSINT community. So it's one of those things where it gives us an opportunity to really flesh out stuff. So it's awesome. So yeah, shout out to OSINT.team, OSINT Curious, TechKC, and I think we will leave it at that. Everyone have a good day, and if you have any questions, you know where to hit us up at. Thank you.
Bye.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peace.